On the 11th of October 1946, inside the execution chamber of Hamlin Prison, a notorious and brutal guard who worked inside of Auschwitz and Bergen-Belsen during the Second World War came face to face with the gallows. Walter Quakernack, who was helped up the steps of the execution structure, where British executioner Albert Pierrepoint was waiting for him. There were many members of the concentration camp staff and also SS officials who at the end of the Second World War went on the run, and they tried to escape any form of punishment. The majority were never brought to trial, and still today there are searches for those men and women who inflicted torture, execution and suffering on a daily basis. Some were identified and captured by the Allies for their crimes, and at their trials a number of witnesses came forward to speak about their terrible actions. Welcome to The Untold Past. Join us today as we look at the execution of Walter Quakernack, and as always, to support our channel, please make sure to subscribe. Walter Konrad Quakernack was born on the 9th of July 1907 inside of Bielefeld in Germany. It's not known what his early life was like. However, in 1931, years before Hitler rose to the position of Chancellor in Germany, Quakernack joined the Nazi Party. At this time, the Nazis were promising to restore German pride following the loss of the First World War. They also claimed to rebuild Germany in terms of the economy and the job opportunities that people had. But Quakernack went further in his ideological devotions and his mentality, and in May 1933 he then joined the SS and was member number 125,266 inside of the paramilitary group. Around this time, Heinrich Himmler had already begun to expand the SS, and it would become the most feared paramilitary group inside of Germany. The SS also had a military wing known as the Waffen-SS, and these would be deployed on the battlefields of the Second World War, and many Allies who came across SS officers knew that these were the most ardent in their ideological devotions to Adolf Hitler. They knew how dangerous the SS were, and they did begin as a small bodyguard detachment to protect Hitler and senior Nazis during rallies and speeches, but at the time they were being expanded, with probably a view on one day being involved in a global conflict. As the Second World War broke out, Walter Quakernack did probably see action on the front lines as part of an SS group, and he suffered some form of leg injury, and this took him away from the battle for a brief period, but he was then the following year conscripted back into the Waffen-SS, and he served as a camp guard, as an Unterscharführer, overseeing groups of captured prisoners of war. He then became a secretary inside of the Politische Abteilung, which was known as the concentration camp's Gestapo, and he was involved in the department inside of Auschwitz concentration camp. This was a compulsory part of the concentration camp command structure, and Quakernack was involved in the interrogations, investigations, intelligence surveillance, and keeping a log of the records of the camp, and he would have to liaise with those inside of the crematoria to identify those who had been killed. The Politische Abteilung also handled police work inside of the camps, and they monitored identification papers and also tried to break up resistance groups within the camps, as well as prevent escapes. They were known for carrying out execution and torture upon prisoners. Inside of Auschwitz, most of this took place inside the punishment centre of Block 11, or the camp's Gestapo, as well as in public, out in the open. These members of staff were known for their brutality. They were very feared. Inside of Auschwitz, Quakernack was known for getting involved in executions, and it was later claimed at his trial that he was working as an executioner and that he participated in slaughter using his pistol and gun. He executed many prisoners using what was known as a Genickschuss method, in which a guard would fire a bullet into the back of the neck of a prisoner and victim, and thousands were executed by this. There were even specific execution chambers made for the neck shooting in different camps such as Buchenwald, and it was disguised as a false medical facility. Quakernack had established himself as an executioner, and he then received a new role inside of the deadliest concentration camp, and he became a team leader inside the crematoria. He was also involved in the gassings of prisoners of war, in particular captured members of the Red Army and Soviets. He would then be involved in administering the poison gas as well as driving many people into the gas chambers by force, whipping and beating them to go quicker. He also may have overseen the burning of prisoners following being slaughtered in the chambers. For his destructive work, Quakernack was promoted, and he then became an Oberscharführer and was awarded the War Merit's Cross. He must have been an ardent SS official, and he was seen as someone who could command a camp, and he was promoted to the camp commandant of Arbeitslager Larohuta in April 1944, and this was a small subcamp of Auschwitz based nearby. He also served inside of Auschwitz III, known as Monowitz, the large IG Farben industrial site based in the complex. But inside of the deadliest concentration camp, Walter Quakernack was known for being a barbaric and brutal man, and also someone who was more than happy to execute and torture. Whilst he worked inside of Auschwitz, he was witnessed killing prisoners himself, and he would often lead them into large warehouses, and Quakernack would then enter this warehouse, often drunk, and armed with his MP40 machine gun. Whilst inside the warehouse, he then fired this weapon indiscriminately, and killed all prisoners, and he did not stop firing until all of them were dead. One member of the Sonderkommando unit who were tasked with cleaning up the slaughter recalled how he was instructed to remove bodies on a truck, and these were Quakernack's victims. He claimed that Quakernack was stood in the middle of the warehouse, and surrounding him were dead bodies, and his MP40 gun was still smoking, and his SS uniform was covered in red stains from the blood of his victims, and he was allegedly laughing very loudly. He was known for being a drunk, who often also violently lashed out at inmates in anger. At the end of the Second World War, he tried to make a run for it. He had in early 1945 been part of a death march of around 500 prisoners from Auschwitz, but then in April 1945, Quakernack was evacuated to Bergen-Belsen along with another death march. When he had taken the prisoners to the camp, which was suffering heavily, Quakernack then joined a combat unit which at the end of the war was disbanded, but on the 5th of July 1945 he was arrested at Lippereile. He was then discovered to have been a brutal concentration camp guard, and as he had worked inside of Bergen-Belsen concentration camp, he was then sent to the second Belsen trials to answer charges of crimes against humanity. Previously, inside of the first Belsen trials, guards such as Josef Kramer, the Beast of Belsen, Irma Grazer, the notorious female guard, and others were condemned for their actions. Alongside Walter Quakernack were a number of other ruthless guards who had worked inside of Bergen-Belsen, and some had also worked at Auschwitz, and some were sentenced to death for their crimes. Walter Quakernack was one of those who was condemned to death, and he was sent to Hamelin prison following his trial to await his death sentence. He had a few months to wait, and in early October 1946 he met with British executioner Albert Pierrepoint and his assistant, who would carry out his execution inside Hamelin prison's execution chamber. Pierrepoint took note of Quakernack's height and weight, and he calculated the drop needed to snap his neck and instantly kill him. On the 11th of October 1946, Walter Quakernack was fetched from his prison cell, and he was walked into the execution chamber by Pierrepoint and his assistant. He climbed up the scaffold, the wooden gallows that had been created for the executions of Second World War guards. Pierrepoint would execute many former guards of the concentration camps, and on the scaffold he made sure that Quakernack's arms and legs were secured, and he then placed a white cap over his head and then the noose. This had been passed over the gallows, and the former guard was then shuffled over a chalk X which had been made on the trapdoor. Once he was in place, Walter Quakernack was then sent crashing through the gallows. Walter Quakernack was a barbaric and ruthless executioner and concentration camp guard who was known for slaughtering hundreds of prisoners with his own machine gun, and he was also known for sending thousands of victims to the gas chambers. He was someone who had little to no remorse for his actions, and he was an ardent Nazi, and also became a commandant of his own subcamp. But he met his match inside of the Belsen trials, as he was condemned for crimes against humanity, and confronted by the British executioner Albert Pierrepoint, he was sent through the gallows to his death. Thanks for watching. To support our channel, please make sure to subscribe, and once again, thank you so much for watching.